Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I wasn't even planning on watching this movie. If you saw my short, I was already flaming this movie before it came out. I just looked at the trailer and I was like, there's no way that's good. Like, it just looks corny, it looks dumb. Like, what are we doing here, right? Not only that, you know, I was going to watch the movie and when I checked the runtime, I almost flatlined. Almost 3 hours long? Bro, that's not a movie, that's a part-time job. And then, on top of that, I start seeing all the glaze online. Everybody's saying it's good, calling it a masterpiece, and I'm sitting there like, bro, you guys really think it's good? Or are you just glazing it because it has Leo in it? So I went in, you know, no popcorn, no drink, no girl, no friends, nothing. I just walked in, raw dog, 3 hours of straight cinema, and honestly, I don't even know what to think. On one hand, it was better than I expected, right? But on the other hand, there were so many moments that just didn't make sense. Not to mention the runtime is criminal. Still, I'll admit, it did have enjoyable parts. Now look, the director is Paul Thomas Anderson, and you might know him from nothing. Now this dude's made a ton of movies, but if you were to ask a random person, they'd probably be like, the one with Adam Sandler? Yeah, that's basically his range. Besides that, you have the cast, obviously Leo running around, acting like a tweaker. Benicio del Toro, Regina Hall, you know, some familiar faces. Along with some other people that you've probably seen somewhere, but you can't really pick out of a lineup. Not to mention the budget, you know, it's 130 to 140 million from what I read. And like I said, the runtime is 2 hours and 50 minutes long. And for the reviews, 96 on Rotten Tomato and an 8.5 on IMDb. Translation is, the glaze is real, the glaze is strong. Just like him in the movie. Viva la revolution! Viva la glaze! Now, if you don't know what this movie's about by now, it's basically where Leo is a washed up old ex-revolutionary. And he used to blow stuff up with his girlfriend, right? Pretty romantic. But now they had a kid, the mom dipped, and now he's a single paranoid dad raising his daughter off the grid. Fast forward 16 years later and boom, Colonel Lockjaw shows up. Yeah, that's his real name. This ain't no WWE superstar. It's an actual name of a person. From there, he tries to kidnap his daughter, and the movie basically turns into Taken 4, Revolutionary Edition. But alright, look, let's talk about this chaotic ride because, like I said, I'm kind of mixed on this movie. Because on one hand, it had some fire moments, some entertaining stuff. You know, I was waiting to see what happened. But on the other hand, I was sitting there like, who the heck wrote this? So let's start off with the dumb stuff, the cons. And the first thing I'll say is, when they were writing this movie, someone was like, you know what this movie needs? A binocular wank scene. Dude was on his binoculars. And he was getting happy with himself. What? And I'm sitting there like, really? We're doing this just to a girl. Then there's Teyana Taylor and her character. She acts like a gangster, right? Her and her friends, they're just a group of gangsters, right? The revolutionaries, they're fighting for causes. If you disagree with us, we'll bomb you, right? We'll kill you. That's one way to solve things, yeah. But not only that, there's a scene where they're like at a bank. They're trying to rob it, whatever. And they're acting all gangster when they go in, but as soon as the cops show up, they ain't gangster no more. They're running. And not to mention when they're running, driving like it's GTA. They're hitting every car on the way like, oh, cops won't notice us. And then if you love piano music, let's just say you're gonna love this movie. Because I'm not kidding. There was like an hour, maybe an hour and a half total of just a freaking piano playing the same 3 keys. Felt like I was trapped in a bad elevator. And you know, I like piano music from time to time, so even if I'm saying it, you know, it's something. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying get ready to listen to piano for an hour. And then the main thing about this movie was basically there's a group of white supremacists, right? They hate black people. That concept, that idea. I feel like it's overplayed. I feel like it just keeps getting played over and over again. And the gangster way, you know, is the right way. You know, revolt. If someone disagrees, bomb them. Kill them. But I mean, those are really all the things I can nitpick and stuff, but it's really just like a bunch of weirdness. Like the movie's entertaining, but it has a bunch of weird things from time to time. And I think one of the main killers is the runtime. It drags at certain points. Not necessarily like, oh gosh, this is so boring, but it's like you start to get uncomfortable. You're sitting there for 3 hours. You know how long that is? Like, you know how that feels in a chair, 3 hours, no popcorn, no drink, no friend, nothing. It just starts to feel like it's overdoing it. And I think they could have shaved off some time here. It did not need to be almost 3 hours long. And there was also some pointless scenes in here where, you know, there was a scene where Leo was trying to run. And if you watch the movie, you know what I'm talking about. There's like a scene where he's trying to, you know, call on the phone, and then he has to run and do all this stuff. All that to lead to just something that they could have just sliced all that in half and it would have made no difference. But those are some of the cons, some of the things I saw where I just didn't like or I thought were goofy or wacky. But for the pros, I'll say, look, the story is actually engaging. You know, as dumb as it may be at some points, I wanted to see the nonsense that would happen next. And not only that, people in my theater were laughing at some of the jokes. So, you know, I'll give it that. I'll give it that. And of course, Leo, you know, he did his thing. Imagine Eddie from Venom, you know, thrown into this world. That's basically who he was. He was just a tweaked out revolutionary. You know, when he was on screen, I just felt like he captured the moment, even if it felt like he didn't sleep for 5 days. And even Lockjaw himself, man, he was a surprisingly good villain, if that's what you want to call him in this. Man was playing a straight up creep. Like, the dude really sat there wanking it with binoculars. Who wrote that in? And what I liked about his story was how he tried to play both sides. You know, he really liked black women, but he also wanted to be in this group that hated black people. Like, dude wanted to be a simp and racist. And, you know, he was the kind of villain you wanted to see die. You know, one of those villains that you just, ooh, I want to see what's coming to him. But at the end, I feel like what they do with his character is kind of underwhelming. But regardless, Sean Penn cooked in this movie. And Lockjaw, while he was nasty, he was memorable. Not to mention Jack Trout, you know, he was like a sergeant or an officer, and, you know, there were scenes in here where he had to interrogate people, and I think just his presence alone with the piano playing, I think it was really good and entertaining. And really everyone who was on screen was entertaining for the most part. It's just the story is a little goofy or wacky at points. But overall, I did enjoy this movie. I'm not going to sit here and glaze it and say it's great, like a lot of people are, but it was better than I was expecting. And, you know, it's good when a movie can do that. You know, you see a trailer, you don't think it's going to be good, you go in, and you'd like it more than you thought you would. I think that's always good, and that's what this movie did for me. But with that being said, I'm going to give it a Salty Popcorn Award. I think it's good, but I don't think it deserves to be seen in theaters. You know, if you watch it in theaters, you'll enjoy it, I think. But make sure you bring someone or eat some popcorn or something, you know, don't be like me. But anyways, guys, that's just what I thought. Comment below if you've seen this and what your thoughts are. You know, did you like this movie, or are there some things you didn't like? You know, I'd be very curious to know. With that being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.